Welcome to another episode of the Quaggling Sand podcast. Recording right now at this very moment, June 23rd, 2021. Yes, a little bit later than normal this week. The weekend, which contained the brand new Juneteenth holiday on the 19th, Father's Day on the 20th, and my birthday on the 21st, was spent in lovely Phoenix, Arizona. So a little bit of traveling, came back, caught up on some things, got back on Tuesday actually. So my goal was to try to catch a little free time Tuesday night to do this podcast, but here we are Wednesday. Enough of the excuses. So, dropping anchor. I was listening while in Phoenix to the latest episode of the Podcasting 2.0 podcast. Adam Curry and his developer friend, I think his name is Dave something. I'm awful. I should know his name. They are working on extensions in the podcast namespace for RSS extensibility to continue using RSS. And so, as you may or may not know, Adam Curry basically invented podcasting. He was friends with Dave Weiner. He was either DJing or working at MTV at the time. And he said, hey, I should be able to record audio and play it on an MP3 player. How about an iPod, hence the name, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it stuck. And he and Dave Weiner figured out a way to enable freely sharing with RSS subscriptions the audio files that he had created, and podcasting was born. So totally give credit where credit is due. Joe Rogan did not invent podcasting. Spotify did not invent podcasting. Apple did not invent podcasting, although Adam Curry did work closely. I think he has a story about him and Steve Jobs contacting Adam Curry. I think he eventually would demonstrate podcasting on a Mac on stage at a Macworld or maybe a developer conference. So, yeah. Anyway, during the most recent podcast, which I will have a link to in our show notes, which, by the way, are a newsletter. And I'll get to that in a second why, but I've mentioned this before. So the quagglingsand.substack.com newsletter profile page, and you can grab the show notes for recent shows by title. And so I was listening to his show, which is about, what was it? We're All a Flutter, I think is the name of it. Again, in the show notes, in the newsletter structure. And they're talking about how Apple, Spotify, others, I don't even know if Amazon has an RSS feed for their version of podcasting. But basically, RSS feeds are in danger of slipping away. And I think I remember a long time ago, I think Facebook used to publish RSS feeds for individual wall posts, so I could subscribe to your Facebook RSS feed. But that was before, and so the reason Facebook sort of killed that off, and the reason to deprecate and then eventually, or maybe even just initially and finally, remove support for RSS is to force people to download, install, and use the Spotify app, the Apple Podcast app, the Google Podcast app, the Amazon Music app to play podcasts. I believe you can also listen to Amazon podcasts in Audible, and so on. So there are various fights for podcast distribution real estate. And I think the reliance on Anchor, which is a Spotify property, Spotify bought them. So relying on Anchor as a primary publishing platform will be problematic into the near term. And, so dropping anchor means not only does it mean parking your ship somewhere and staying around for a while, but it means that dropping, not dropping outright, but dropping in priority. So the goal has been to not using WordPress or other junk like this, even though 70% of the internet supposedly uses WordPress. I am not a fan of PHP. So I avoid it at all costs. So the idea would be to publish to own self-host or cloud host. I would say self-hosting is in your, on a computer in your home or office that you own. You can touch the hardware, you can install software without sharing resources in a cloud infrastructure and a server that you have no idea where it is and who else is using it and all that stuff. But, for the purposes of hosting things like this, I will say that cloud hosting is also enough of self-hosting to qualify. But ultimately, publish your own content on your own servers. And I've commented on this elsewhere on FFS Talk most recently. Self-content ownership, self-publishing, agency online. So the ability to control what you publish, how you publish it. These are all throwback ideas. I know they're old school thinking. No algorithms, what? But so anyway, that's a longer, more political discussion. But so the RSS feeds are a minor thing. I personally think that RSS feeds should. I have said they should be deprecated, and I still think that. But the deprecation of RSS should not take place at the behest of companies with alternative profit-driven motives. The deprecation of RSS should take place as part of an evolution into a more usable syndication scheme or content pull technology, right? So you syndicate your file, and then someone can come along and read that file anytime they want. So they're pulling. You're not publishing to them. You're just publishing, and then they're consuming it. So it's like a web page, right? It's very similar. So my personal view, and it's something I'd like to experiment with. So it's on the project stove, not on a front burner just yet. But is the notion that you could, and okay, so if you happen to check out the show notes for this episode today, Dropping Anchor, and if you were to go, I make a reference to the podcasting 2.0 podcast episode. I think it's We're All Aflutter, or just All Aflutter. So I have links to that. I've already written this part, so now I don't have to remember it. So the show, the audio, is found on podcastindex.org, and there's a podcast profile page, and you can see all the shows. And the most recent show, right now, as I'm speaking, is the podcast in question, the episode. Next week, it will be a different one, probably. So I cannot link directly to an episode of a podcast, apparently. I'm sure there's a way, but they don't make it really easy. There's no visible way, like share this episode. You can download the files. That's not what I want. So if you go for the show notes, you will end up on Adam Curry's website, and there's a Freedom Controller generated page of links and all the usual stuff. And it doesn't link to the podcast episode. You can download the audio file. So to me, that's kind of bizarre. Anyway, if you or say with this example. So this is in the show notes. You can check it out. The part that doesn't seem to work that I would propose that if the podcast index published a page with shareable links, and then each episode was not just a player wrapped, like a card interface that's wrapping the audio file with a player, JavaScript player, probably. Maybe it's HTML player, but so, you can play the audio from the page, and that's fine. But why not use existing data structure found on schema.org? That's one of my favorites, because everybody seemed to have bought into that. So why not structure the page as you would an RSS feed? So there's enough information in the structured data on the page, and it could be embedded as attributes on tags. You can embed it as a JSON. It's a JSON BD. No, JSON structure, or you can use RDF, I think. So include all of the data that you would put in the RSS feed in schema.org structured data enhanced human readable HTML page. And now you don't have an RSS feed where you have to use CData in the description to include any sort of formatting, which then doesn't always get handled properly. And then you can share the HTML page, because web browsers can display HTML pages. So if I wanted to link to this podcast episode, I should be able to link to a structured data enhanced, I don't know if that's what they call it, a page with structured data according to the schema.org model, with all of the relevant data, description, item ID, all the stuff. You can stick it in there, but it's still human readable. So rather than having a separate RSS feed, you have a document that can be downloaded. Actually, this is the episode, so this would be the equivalent of an item in an RSS feed. And then you can have a feed, which is an HTML document, which contains these items, HTML pages. They can still be linked. They have URLs. They're human readable. They could support Open Graph and Twitter Card. You could share them on RSS. You could share your elements that would normally be in RSS feeds, but since they are human readable HTML with Open Graph and Twitter Card and other metadata, meta tags, you can share them on Twitter and Facebook and the usual crappy places, and they will display the Open Graph image and title and links and all that. And you can still link. There is a type, an attribute for linking to a web feed, I think it is, and that would be to your classic RSS. All right, or Atom, I suppose. So yeah, why not use that? So that's something I would like to toy with, and that's the road I will go down. I just heard a buzzing or something. I think one of my electronic devices is trying to get to me. Love it. So I have a list of projects I'm working on in the show notes as well. I know at some point, I think it was my first or second episode of the Quaggling Sand podcast, I said I was going to try to do a weekly sprint, but solo entrepreneurial weekly sprints are tricky. They don't end up being contiguous sprint time intervals, which I think is detrimental to the overall sprint goal. So it's something I have to work on to try to reconfigure my day and week time allocation. But I am trying to take all these various pieces that I've developed for a couple of different projects over a long period of time. I'm kind of embarrassed to say how long, but and form what I'm calling the RCT Core. Really Cool Technologies is my company. Reallycool.com is a domain I bought when I was working at Apple in 1996. I was sharing an office with my colleague Jim Krupacki. We were both thinking we should buy a domain because why not? They were $75 from Network Solutions at the time. This was back when you would register your NIC handle, and I believe mine was DH1426. Buy your domain from Network Solutions, pay your $75, and never have to try to tell people that your old email address at netcom.com was now the same username but at best.com, which was exactly why I finally said, I got to buy a domain. So Jim bought Mosphere. So Jim at mosphere.com. Hilarious. And I bought reallycool.com because I used to say that. That's really cool. Hey, really cool. That's neat. That's cool. That's really cool. So that was my foray into the domain business. I could have bought business.com probably. I don't know when that was actually purchased, but could have bought my way into millions of dollars of resale value on any number of domains that I did not buy. But it has since become Really Cool Consulting. Was my LLC in Phoenix, mostly for the purpose of B2B, corp to corp consulting. And then here in Nevada, Really Cool Technologies LLC, same domain, different flavors. Anyway, so the RCT Core is a collection of different database schema, some model code, front end, and then I would like to build a flexible, like maybe I want to do a microservice, maybe I want to go monolithic, maybe I want to mix. So not necessarily like a universal platform for both, although that would be nice, but at least be able to go in one or the other direction and then possibly not kill myself trying to switch if I need to. So I'm trying to take all the things I've learned over the years and, you know what they say, analysis paralysis. So it takes forever and I get tired because I have 10 other things going on for every other 10 things I'm working on. And there you go. So I'm complaining and I apologize and thank you for listening to that. Anyway, so I have a list of objects on there. I have a list of projects, and I was just thinking that database objects are a thing that's in there. And I've been reading and listening to presentations a lot lately about messaging infrastructure. The big name lately is Kafka from Apache. And Confluent. I downloaded an ebook from Confluent, and now I'm their best buddy. They like to email me all the time. But they've done some work with KSQL and some other tools and workflow, and they actually have some pretty good presentations. And then there's Pulsar, which is basically the same type of tool from a different angle. Everybody thinks that'll be the Kafka killer. Kind of interesting. Can't we all just get along? But I've been learning. So the RCT Core PGSQL sub-project has included in it in database messaging, so that I can, if I update an object, if I create, update, or delete, although I don't delete. So I basically have an append-only database model. Delete is allowed, but not by anything other than an admin user. So you're basically the goal would be to sort of prune dead objects that are clearly not used anymore. But mostly, objects are marked as deleted, but not actually deleted. So I already had that. That I thought through a long time ago. And then I have an internal in Postgres. It's a schema of database messages. So anytime something happens, you can publish a message, and then you can consume it. And say you want to cascade a date change on an event to other related events or whatever. So you can do that asynchronously via this event interface that I had, and that still works. But nowadays, the new cool is to use Kafka and have your message stream with topics and all kinds of cool stuff. So I'd like to think that I was already thinking this way a few years ago. And now the question is, do I take advantage of the modern coolness? AWS has a Kafka stream. I cannot remember what they call it, but it's streams for AWS, something like that. So totally doable. Could use both. Could have in database and then microservice store style messaging between different services. I think it would totally make sense to use a message stream to publish notifications to users. At some point when I talk about the food truck platform, the mobile vendor platform, a big part of that is notifying people when cancellations and changes happen or when items for sale are already sold out. So a notification bus seems like it would work out nicely. So a lot of different moving parts, a lot of things inspired by the mobile vending platform, which when you think about it includes scheduling. It includes different users, customers, vendors, event hosts, event organizers, sponsors, menu items, or you could say inventory because not everything's food or drink, user notifications. So it's got a whole location, geographical locations, latitudes and longitudes, and regions. So there's all kinds of parts that apply to various other things. So even though you've never seen it, very few people have, it was a good platform for learning and exploring a lot. When I lived in Silicon Valley, when I kicked this off, it was a great, learning experience to apply what I was learning out on the ground to coding. I used to code by day in a coffee shop in downtown Sunnyvale. And in the evening, I would go to food truck events and I would show little demos on my phone. And where is that motivation in this post-pandemic world? That seems like maybe not necessarily going to food truck events, especially since, as I saw in the news today, June 23rd, Nevada is back up to 4% case positivity. And they've been bragging daily about the drops to, I think it was down to 3.4. But May 14th, I think they lifted, or they went to 80% capacity, and they relaxed. And then June 1st, completely free for all, doors open. And so on March 17th, I did a little Twitter line in the sand. I said, okay, March 17th. No, I'm sorry, May. May 14th, 80%. May 17th, and I note this with a newspaper link. A news link. Can I reboot my brain at the moment? On May 17th, and I said, let's see what happens in 45 days. So 45 days from that tweet will be July 1st. Technically, depending on if you treat the day as the previous day's data or whatever, but we'll just say July 1st is the 45 plus or minus 1 days, and we'll see where we are. I hate to say it, but I think we might hit 5%. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I just said I could go wandering around to mobile vendor events, which I did always enjoy doing back in the day. It's a great distraction, especially since it's all part of what I was working on. And there's no better way to develop something like this than to talk to people who will be using it and see what they think. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, so I have a whole bunch of project components. I made a little list of things that are on the front burner right now, and those are parts. And then the projects I'm working on, I'm kind of starting with a couple of small things that I would really like to wishful thinking. I'd really like to start hacking on in earnest once I get the items on that list up and running. One of them is Terraform 1.0. They just dropped the big 1.0 release the other day. So I'll make my infrastructure orchestration, my IAC, infrastructure as code. So RCT Core IAC is Packer and Terraform to build what is basically at the moment EC2 machine images. I should really be going serverless for some things where it makes sense. So there should be an RCT Core serverless module, or it could be called something like. I think AWS has a step function service, which is not a step function, but it could very easily be. Maybe I'll call it a delta function. Dirac or Heaviside, that will be the question. But anyway, so I have another thing. I really like the notion of automating actions or constructing actions for automation, I guess. That is similar to what the continuous integration and continuous deployment people have done in the GitHub, GitLab, and similar spheres. So it seems, it's not necessarily human friendly. It's nerd friendly, but certainly the ability to easily string some things together with some YAML has some appeal. So I have a little baby project to automate some things. And my ultimate goal there was because I killed off my IFTTT service. I think it's still publishing my Instagram post to Twitter automatically. So what I didn't stop that. But I used to have like a dozen IFT rules. And when they started charging, I stepped away, and they still run 3 of them. But I think IFT and Zapier and similar could be implemented for your home use or your self-hosting use, as I already talked about. And I would love to see a more programmable, more controllable. My peeve with IFT was that if something failed, it didn't retry. So if a service was down, or you were out of luck. And in today's microservice 1,000 presentation bolus that's available today, that's like one of the big things is the ability to consume a message, and if the service fails, then the message can be left and reconsumed, or you can replay a stream from a certain point. If you make things idempotent, you can replay them safely. There's all these cool things that can be done with these tools that are available. But if you're the likes of Zapier and IFTTT, and I'm sure there's a few more, but those are 2 that I think kind of got the most light shown on them. You can use those tools, but they don't really expose, certainly at a free tier, robust, controllable execution. So I think that's something. I think that's something that people should be allowed. We should let you do that. No, these tools to automate things should be in everyone's pocket or wheelhouse, however you want to look at it. And I would like to see more automation. Even the act of publishing newsletters and podcasts and doing various other and sharing things to social media. I guess there's things like Hootsuite or TweetDeck and similar. And then, IFTTT and Zapier. But nothing seems to be all kind of one ring to rule them, I guess you could say. So that's one of my little sort of pipe dream projects. By the way, Yahoo Pipes was very cool, and it actually consumed RSS feeds, and you could process them, do transformations on them, and send them on to another block. So you'd be moving RSS items and feeds around. So it's kind of an interesting idea. And OpenSearch used to return RSS feeds. So if you can use simple automation tools with something like GitHub Actions, so you construct a little YAML file of steps, and then you trigger, you have a cron job or something that grabs an RSS feed, triggers, hey, we have a new feed, and then you can scan through and find new items, process them, pass them around, do your thing. That would be interesting. So that's one idea. The Yahoo Pipes visualization was pretty cool too. I think there are some clones. I'm not gonna put this in the notes, but if you are so inclined, you can Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo or what's the new one now? What is Brendan's Brave, the Brave search engine. Why did I forget that? The Brave search engine just launched. So you can use your search engine of choice. You search for Yahoo Pipes, and you'll find other implementations. That's something that I wish Yahoo would have open sourced. That would have been cool. But there are other variants of that. So anyway, so I'm hoping to increase my productivity once I get these blocks working, so I can build on them. The number one thing that's totally bothering me is the entire process of like, okay, we have another podcast, we have another website. I just want to set up a basic coming soon page so that there's a presence of some kind, and then you have to, you want to do verification and validation and domain ownership proof or whatever you need to do. So just having one page to respond, one static HTML document, that's all we need. But just getting that set up on, the goal in my case is to have AWS infrastructure to build in, and the Terraform parts make some of that easy. But I had constructed my Terraform stuff to build up EC2 instances and all. Well, step one should be, here's a static page that can be served from a S3 bucket. And if I need to do any sort of computation to generate a page, it could be a Lambda function, serverless. So that's something I need to do to streamline that first step to boot up a new domain, a website-oriented project, even if it's just a marketing site. I mean, there's not even a reallycool.com website, and there isn't a danhugo.com blog, though both domains are mine. So, infinitely many things to do. I should never sleep, ever. Nor should you. Story time. But before I tell my story for the day, do not forget to subscribe to the newsletter, Quaggling Sand, QUOGGLINGSAND, Quaggling Sand. It's that feeling you get when you've been sitting on your foot or your hand or your arm, and it's numb, and then the circulation returns, that tingly, quaggling sand feeling. It's something I came up with when I was, I think, 4 years old, 5. And as my birthday was just this past Monday, that was a long time ago. Subscribe to the newsletter. It points to the currently and ironically Anchor.fm source of the podcast. This podcast, the FFS Talk podcast, the Hugo Floss podcast, and haven't launched. There will be 2 more coming. And I publish this information on my buymeacoffee.com profile. You are in no way obligated to buy me a coffee, but rest assured, if you do, I will buy coffee. 2 brave souls have sponsored me thus far, and there will be some Death Wish medium roast is a new offering. Some medium roast whole bean from Death Wish. I'm gonna grab some of that. I will probably also get some. I have Lavazza. I think, what did I get? I do not remember. There's a different bean, Lavazza espresso roast, that I intend to get as well. So those will be the 2 beans. So you are not obligated in any way to buy any coffee, but the Buy Me a Coffee profile does a little double duty. So I publish my project links, newsletters, podcasts, other media and discussion, and other project links, and all kinds of stuff will go there. And if you feel the need to contribute some caffeine, which is what keeps all this moving, who am I to stop you? Okay, story time. So yeah, don't forget, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, quagglingsand.substack.com, anchor.fm/quagglingsand for the podcast profile, which I do not like, by the way, because each website can do their own thing with the C data that is in the RSS item description. So who knows what you're going to get. People should be able to just publish HTML that may make it look like the way they want. So that's a project coming soon. I mean, an infrastructure around that. You can do that today. All right, story time. So we can get out of here. I got work to do. It's almost 11 p.m. June 23rd. So when I used to work at, it was actually called Aleph, and they were transitioning to Jawbone when I joined the company. I worked there for about a year. It's total chaos. I didn't really care for it, but it was interesting. There were interesting people, but the way the company was run. So the Sunnyvale office was cool. The San Francisco interface to the Sunnyvale office, not so much. But anyway, so I was hired initially as a contractor, and then I became full-time. The goal, and by the way, this was all a result of my Palm colleagues. So some of the people from Palm joined Jawbone. One of them was actually Travis. You may have heard about Fuchsia. So there were some people, including Travis and Corey, a couple other. Anyway, those are the 2 cool people. The coolest. They were working on, we called it the J-Boner OS. But Travis is like an operating system copy machine. I don't know. You just put in enough toner paper, and he just spits out OSs. So there will be more stories about our interactions at Palm, perhaps. But anyway, he was also at Jawbone for a while. I joined Jawbone, if I'm saying that right. Boom. What the hell was it called? The boombox, the little portable speaker thing. That was the big selling point. So we're going to be making these in Mexico. So I joined the company. My initial goal was to help to build a quality, controlled, visible, controllable production line in Mexico. Not that I was going to go there, but take what we were doing at Foxlink in China and be able to move that to Mexico. So I started working there, learned a bunch of stuff. I wrote a Python tool to pull data off of our Bluetooth products over USB. They were using like hex dump, and so that was my first little utilitarian toe in the water. Was a tool to read we were using CSR Bluetooth microcontroller, small SoCs. And, so they were fine. And you could just plug in USB, grab a bunch of data. So all that stuff was easy, but it was managing what you were looking at and diffing and graphing, so there was all kinds of cool stuff that I started playing with. And I started really diving into NumPy, SciPy, Matplotlib, because the production line was using seat licensed, well, maybe, certainly in the US, MATLAB. So a bunch of MATLAB code to do device calibration and testing. And it was fairly straightforward, but it was all in MATLAB. So I said, I guess it would be interesting and easier because we could do it at our desk, we could do it at our lab, we could do it anywhere. Implement these code pieces using Python, NumPy, SciPy, Matplotlib, any whatever else comes along, and the tool I wrote in Python. So it was, I was kind of slowly but surely turning it into a Python shop. So it took me maybe a week or two of concerted effort, because it wasn't my primary, small company, so everything is priority zero, kind of like being a solo entrepreneur. So, and then I sort of at the same time became a QC, failure analysis, data analytics, sort of, you're not doing anything, why don't you do this too? Multiple hat wearer. So one of the pieces of code I wrote would also pull in our manufacturing production line sort of per device scan. So all the data that I was pulling off of devices, we could get that per device that was on the production line in a spreadsheet. So we get a block of the device data, we get the date, the Bluetooth ID, the date that it was finished, date timestamp, which line, which shift. Well, I guess that was the time. Anyway, so we had 3 production lines, 2 shifts a day, six days a week, I think. So I built a tool to visualize failures and retries and all kinds of other cool stuff. So that was kind of fun. So anyway, I was slowly but surely converting everything over to a Python production line. And I was successful, except for the fact that it never got deployed to Mexico. But all the DSP guys, literally, I was sitting in the lab. I was working in the lab late one night, and my eyes beheld a DSP engineer, Steve, the late Steve. Well, I'll just say Steve. He passed away, unfortunately. That was sad. Very, very nice guy. He came in the lab. He's looking at this screen, and he's like, the graph looks right. It was a test curve, so response, microphone, speaker, response curves, all this. He's like, the curve looks right, but it doesn't look the same. Like, what are you using what's going on here? And I said, oh, this is all using Python and Matplotlib and all that. So it's all free software. He said, wait, what? So I showed him all the code, and he said, wait, you got everything running with, why are we buying MATLAB? And I said, well, you're a DSP engineer. You can make use of that. It totally makes sense for you guys to develop models, do an analysis on microphone response. If you change the microphone, you're doing the serious roll up the sleeves, hands-on DSP work. But this is calibrate. These are canned tests. They just have to work reliably in a QC production line environment. No, we're not experimenting and developing. We are running code, getting plots, determining whether a device passes or fails. And we could also use the same process for FFA, field failure analysis. So it was actually super educational, even though the company itself was kind of a chaotic quagmire. Sorry. Boombox. That's what it was called, right? Boombox. That still doesn't sound right. I don't know what it was called. I gave people, my employee, they gave us free headsets every once in a couple times. I just gave them to other people because I never used to use them. And I don't even have my Bluetooth speaker anymore. I gave that to somebody too. So anyway, totally educational experience. I think that's kind of aligns with the whole Maker Faire, hackathon, creativity, dive in, learn what you need to learn to make it work. So that was really fascinating. And the audio DSP guys were totally interesting, and all that stuff was kind of cool. So hands-on with these free tools. I guess the take-home is really the shocking amount of work, learning, or actual production, I guess, that you can accomplish with. There's no doubt about that nowadays with TensorFlow and TinyML and various other tools that are running on small devices and in JavaScript, and just it's insanity. And so this was my first experience taking something into a free software environment that could run anywhere. Totally fascinating. I doubt very much it would get much attention on my resume, but I keep that one in my pocket. And whenever I hear how Python is slow, not good for this or that, I don't let anyone tell you that Python is not a usable language for many things. So, not as exciting a story today, but I definitely recommend giving. And there are various visualization tools now, but Matplotlib had the advantage of working fairly easily with what we were doing with MATLAB. So, go figure. Anyway, that is another episode of Quaggling Sand, the podcast about what you're working on. And for lately, it's just been what I've been working on. I'm looking forward to guest or multiple guest appearances, maybe a live stream. I would really like to migrate to hosted. Anchor becomes secondary, whatever it distributes to. More power to more publication platforms, but need to own the origin and then invite people to join in more vigorously, lest you listen to only me. And who wants to do that? All right. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for visiting my Buy Me a Coffee page. If for no other reason than to see those links, subscribe to this newsletter. In the newsletter, there's links to the Anchor page, also to the weekend edition on review, all kinds of stuff. Thanks for taking part. Thanks for listening, reading, sharing, liking, resharing, all that jazz. Until next time, bye-bye.